What's up, guys? Mr. Carter here, once again, coming at you from the classroom. Hope you're doing good. Hope your week is going well. And it's time for another video lesson. Now, we've been talking about the 1950s. Good stuff. All right, so today we're going to talk about one of the most kind of critical things of the 1950s, which was the Red Scare. All right? So you may have heard of this before. So let's start off with a quick little summary. What is paranoia? Right, think about the idea of being paranoid, right? Scared of something, right? Paranoia is this idea that something is kind of like lurking, or there's just a present fear of something. Sometimes it's rational, like you can be paranoid about something that could actually happen, or sometimes it's irrational. So when you think about historical examples of paranoia, you might think about during the plague, right? People were paranoid about this sickness, and they were doing all kinds of things that people wouldn't normally do. For example, we learned about this last year. During the plague, there were people literally covering their skin in like butter and onions because they thought that would shield them from the boils, which makes no sense. People were killing women who could read or write because they believed that they were causing the plague. People were attacking European Jews because, of course, the Jews didn't get sick as often. So paranoia really makes people do things that they wouldn't normally do. All of us have seen paranoia firsthand because we lived through COVID. So if you watched how people behaved during the coronavirus thing, it truly was paranoia. There were people who just behaved so weirdly. I remember one time I was in a Zaxby's or something, and there's a guy in a drive-thru that had a World War I era gas mask on. What are you doing? Well, I'm sure he probably justified it like, well, I wouldn't normally wear this, but the disease is everywhere and it could get me. So paranoia really makes people behave in strange ways. Well, today we're talking about a different kind of paranoia, political and social paranoia. This idea that the people living next to you might not actually be, God-loving American citizens. What if they're spies? What if they're secret communists? All right, not today. Listen, am I afraid of communism? No, not even a little bit. I'm not afraid of communism. So I want you to maybe think for a moment. Why would people be afraid of communism back then? In fact, why don't you pause the video and why don't you discuss, you can even talk to the people around you, for just about 2 minutes, why do you think people would be paranoid of communism back then? Okay, go ahead and pause me. Go ahead. All right, welcome back. So, hopefully you kind of discussed why some people might be paranoid of communism. Here's a couple things that I thought of. Number one, at this point in time, people are scared of any kind of new political idea. Okay? Think about this. What has just happened in Europe that was basically created by a new political idea? It's World War II. Fascism was created. It was a new political idea. How'd that work out? Did it go good? No. So people are not really excited to get on board with this whole wave of new political ideology. Number two, America is in a not physical war, but in an ideological war with the Soviet Union. Communism is threatening to America because it's the total opposite of everything that we kind of pride ourselves on. Individual competition, right? The idea that you can start a business, well, you can't do that under communism. So it's not just that people don't agree with communism, it's that communism now kind of becomes something in America that's bigger than just a political idea. So I want you to write this down. All right, I want you to put the Red Scare, okay? And then underneath that, I want you to elaborate. And I want you to say, Americans were terrified of the idea of communism. And they really did think about the idea that their neighbors could legitimately be communists, secret spies. So, how did this change our country? Well, for one, I want you to imagine a nation in which everyone is afraid, maybe not everyone, but many people are afraid that anyone that acts differently from them is like against their country. So how do you tell if someone's a communist? All right, in your notes, I want you to put this down. Anyone that was not normal, quote unquote, according to American culture, could be a communist. Anyone that was not normal to American culture could be a communist. Now, there are a lot of famous people that are accused of being communists. For example, Charlie Chaplin, the director and a silent film star, accused of being a communist, actually exiled from America. He was, actually. By the way, listen, communism was actually pretty popular with wealthier, specifically artistic people, even though they would be the people that would probably have to give up a lot of their wealth. It was still a popular idea. So there are a lot of movie stars that are affected by this. Lots of people try to kind of like distance themselves from people that they know were communists. All right, it's a big deal. Now, on a separate point, I want you to put down a man named Joseph McCarthy. All right, Joseph McCarthy. I'll put a picture up of him. So Joseph McCarthy was a U.S. Senator, okay? And basically he came out and he said that he has proof of over 200 communist spies in the U.S. State Department. Okay, now, that's a pretty explosive thing to bring forth, right? It would be like if a senator stood up in our Congress today and said, I have proof that, all of these senators are sending stuff to the Chinese. All right, well, what's the first thing everyone's going to want to say? They're going to say, where's your proof? Okay, here's the thing with McCarthy. Were there spies in the U.S. government? Yeah, there were. Were there American spies in the Soviet government? Yes. Both sides were 100% spying on each other in every way, shape, or form. But were there as many as he claimed there were? That's debatable, because the ones that we found, there weren't that many. And if they weren't ever discovered, they're never going to say they were a spy, right? So I want you to write down under McCarthy. He kind of drives the Red Scare. He encourages U.S. citizens to question their leaders and their neighbors. What's kind of interesting about this is that in an effort to protect Americans from dangerous ideas, they really they ban a lot of books. So like we kind of I'm not going to say we start burning books, because we didn't, but I mean, it's kind of the same logic of like, well, this is dangerous, so we're going to ban it, right? You can't read this in school. Right, if you've read Fahrenheit 451, that's what this book is about. This book was written, Fahrenheit 451 was written around this time. It's a direct response to the Red Scare and McCarthyism and all of these kind of ultra-conservative ideas of censorship. All right, so hopefully this is making sense. So in America, there's kind of a growing frustration. Now, I want you to really think about this. Society is ultra-conservative, very modest, okay? Prioritizes religion, going to church. Music is very tame. All right, everything's very formal. All right, so I'm going to make a comparison here. And you're probably going to be like, Mr. Carter, what are you talking about? All right, there's this thing that happens with Amish people. All right? When a young Amish person is allowed to leave, the idea is that they leave the Amish community, they experience the world, and then if they choose to come back, they are welcomed into the community, okay? Well, if you live ultra conservatively your whole life, the urges of a normal human don't just like go away. Does that make sense? Like you can't, like, every person is going to have things that they want to do. And just because you live in an ultra conservative society doesn't mean that people don't do them or that your desire to do them goes away. So if everyone in the 50s was so formal and rigid, all it really took was maybe one movement to kind of push people away from that, and you'll see an explosion of change, right? People totally changing and becoming obsessed with this kind of rebellious idea. Now, if you are into pop culture, the movement I'm talking about is rock and roll, right? The movement of rock and roll is not just music, right? Rock and roll is the most uniquely American form of expression. At its core, rock and roll is rebellion. It is questioning authority. Sometimes rock and roll is really deep, and sometimes it's really, introspective. But a lot of really rock and roll isn't about anything, or it's about something very simple, and it's the vibe of the music, right? So I want you to be thinking that, like, in the 50s, I want you to think of it as like a boiling pot, right? Everything is kind of coming to the surface. In the 60s, that's when everything boils over. It just becomes so intense. The 50s is like building, right? There's a disconnect between the older generation and the younger generation. The older generation in the 50s are the people that fought World War II, right? They're the parents. And their kids live in a world where they never saw World War II. They don't know what their parents really had to do. They don't understand them. They want something different, right? They want to be rebellious. They're drawn to new kinds of music than the older people. So all of this is happening at the same time as the Red Scare. And of course, one of the main groups that gets targeted with being a communist are musicians and civil rights activists and social rights activists. So, and I think that kind of makes sense. Anyone that's questioning the system is going to get targeted for being a communist. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. Miss you guys. I hope you're doing fantastic. Hope this is all making sense, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Don't forget to check and see what I'd like for you to do today after the video. Take care. God bless you. Outro.